everyone, I am Kendra Alia here with Kenra Professional on YouTube, and I am here to show you how I created my creamy sun-kissed dimensional blonde highlights, so stick around. I have my client here and she is section off. So we have two sections in the back, one below the nape and one slightly below the crown, and then we have three sections in the front, two below the parietal and one in the top. So my focus is making sure that the sections that are a little larger have more foils than the sections that are small. So as we create this creamy sun-kissed blonde, we want to focus more of her light in the front area where we're going to do some face framing, and we want to make sure that the back is nice and melted through, so that whenever she decides to cut her hair any kind of way, whether it's layers or just blunt, that cut connects to the color that we want to place with our dimensional foils. So let's get right into our foiling process. So let's start in the back where we have this section that's below the nape. Now, whenever we are foiling, we want to make sure we're paying attention to the end. So a lot of texture, especially when the client wears their hair straight, is gonna change the density of the hair texture. So whenever I'm leaving hair out of the foil, I want to pay attention to the ends, because this is what's going to make that impact of blending any type of foil work, especially when we know that the client is going to wear their hair straight 90% of the time. Okay, so it's very different than when the client wears their hair curly 90% of the time, because we want to make sure we're foiling based off of how they would style at home. But in this case, my client wears her hair straight, even though it's very textured, so we want to pay attention to what's going to be more beneficial for her styling. So let's go ahead and do some face framing in the back nape. I'm still going to go in and pay attention to the hairline on each side, and with her wearing her hair straight, I am gonna take my face framing closer to her actual hairline. So although I'm still blending, I want to make sure I pull out the hair that's closest to her hairline. Okay, and we do want to start foiling a little bit lower, so when she does pull her hair up, she can see all that light come through. Now this section is a little bit smaller, so we won't be placing lots of foils in this section, but we want to make sure it's impactful, especially when she wears her hair down. So we have her hairline out, and as you can see, it's a little bit shorter than the rest of her hair, but that's okay, because we're gonna just pull out some of these short pieces that won't make as much of an impact and go in and weave this area in here. And when we're weaving our zigzags, we're gonna drop down just slightly off of the hairline. And although we're creating dimensional foils and we want to give the most blended, melted look, I will not be teasing this section just yet. I wanna make sure the foils on the hairline are visible and we are not covering all of this beautiful work up just yet. But once we get closer in the center with her foils, we will start to do more blending techniques. So it's almost like we're gonna graduate to that once we move upward the head. So what I wanna do is go ahead and create another slice right on top of this foil. This is where I'm gonna actually see more of her hair fall out. Now typically I would just place one foil along this hairline, but I think the great thing about creating dimensional foil work is customizing. So you want to be able to customize your placement based off of your clients, how their hair grow, their density, their length, and their texture. So we're gonna add a slice right above this foil. We're gonna repeat this same step on the right side. And again, just releasing some of these shorter pieces, weaving the slight zigzag part, add a slice right on top. And this is only gonna be your safety net for back of the head face framing is what I usually call it. It's really good, like I said, if clients are wearing their hair up, and even if they're adding like extensions or anything like that, at least you know that the back is covered and it's not gonna look extremely dark, and you won't have that major disconnect from the rest of the dimension that you've put along the front hairline as well as the interior. So I like to feather up into my slices. Even though it's a slice, we still want to smooth out that transition as much as possible. Even though you're always going to use toner when you're foiling, always take into account blending out every aspect of your foils in order to create a smooth dimension transition even before you get to your toning process. Now, this section is not really going to be seen at all. If you think about how the hair falls, and in this case my client's hair is fairly long, so if you think about this section and how it will fall over this area, no one's really gonna see it. So what I like to do is, I don't wanna leave it completely out. I think that if her hair was a little bit shorter, maybe we were cutting a blunt bob, I would leave it alone and just continue to foil up top. But because it's longer, I do want to make sure I have some type of dimension in this area. I just don't need a lot because again, no one's really gonna see it. So I think it's best to go in and tease this entire section and then weave. So if you weave first and then tease, you have more defined light. So your weaving is gonna be shown a little bit more. But if I go in and I tease this entire section, I'm gonna foil this section only. It looks like nothing. It almost looks like this is a joke, right? But when you think about textured hair and the density, it's easier to have a better transition if you leave more depth within your foil work. We want to have, honestly, a large amount of hair left outside of the foils because that is what's gonna blend it through. The contrast from dark textured hair to going blonde, you know, a level 8, 9 is a drastic change. So if you add too much blonde, you're almost gonna lose the melt and the dimension and the layers of tones that you wanna see. So what I wanna make sure I'm doing is I'm not over foiling. So this is how our section in the back is gonna look for now. We have all this beautiful depth that we've kept and we've left alone, and we have her ends. And then remember, along her hairline, these pieces are not as long. So all of the length that you're gonna see once her hair drops down is gonna be a lot brighter towards the ends. And then you're gonna see that depth and that darkness kind of come up, and then it's gonna transition to more light. So you're gonna get this crazy movement throughout her sections. It's almost like you're gonna ask yourself, like, where did all of this come from? But it's definitely a part of being able to incorporate different foiling techniques to create a look instead of us just doing a bunch of slices or a bunch of weaves throughout the whole entire head. So in this section, I think the best thing for us to do is to do vertical diagonals. And then as we're doing our vertical diagonals, we will go in and do a couple tip outs. That way we're connecting our tip outs in this section to what we've done in the section that is below the nape. Okay, so with vertical diagonals, we can kind of flow and piggyback with slices, zigzags, weaves, just to create different movement throughout. Still keeping our slices soft, I am gonna just slightly tease this slice. Then I wanna just feather up into it slightly. Now I'm gonna go ahead and move up about 1 inch, and I'm gonna do a zigzag. So it's a vertical diagonal zigzag part. And then we're gonna elevate this section, weave it through, avoiding too many chunks. I'm gonna feather into the zigzag part. I'm not too concerned about my lightener being right up on the scalp area because I am gonna melt the color with my toner. So it's okay that it's a little bit more blended towards the root. And then her hair is fairly long, so I'm just gonna pull this hair up, and then we're gonna oversaturate just to make sure her ends are nice and covered and that her hair lifts very even. So right after this fold, we're gonna go up about 1 inch, and we're gonna place a slice here. And remember, we're doing tip outs in this area, so this section will be just slightly dimensional towards the root, and a lot of the movement will come in throughout the ends. Because her hair is longer, it's a little easier to do that. Whether if her hair was a little bit shorter, if her hair was above her shoulders, then I wouldn't do so much off the scalp blending. I would bring my foil work up a little more. We're gonna do a slice and we're not gonna tease. So let's go ahead and continue with our diagonal verticals. So I'm just gonna repeat this same placement that we have with these 3 foils moving towards the left side, and then we'll come back and foil the parietal sections. So now that we have our vertical diagonals in this section that's below the crown, above the nape, I want to tip out, but I want to show you something. Whenever you are foiling and you decide to do a tip out, your tip outs need to mimic what you foiled. So here, because we did vertical diagonals, that is how I'm going to tip out this section. Now remember, we want to make sure we're leaving out some depth throughout the end so that we have a softer blend, but it's important that we are consistent with our foiling techniques as far as how we're placing our foils in that section. So the best thing to do when you want to tip out the hair and you have vertical diagonals is pull the hair straight out, vertical, okay, almost as if you're gonna do a layered cut. Then what I like to do is I like to go in and I like to weave vertically throughout this section. So literally I'm gonna just work my comb through the entire section vertical. So then once I have that section pulled out, this is the only portion that I'm actually going to apply lightener to, and I'm just gonna work it up into the other foils. So that way we have that connection up higher, and then as we melt through and we add our toner, it's gonna melt down. So when we're foiling, we're melting up, we're blending up, and then when we're gonna tone, we're gonna melt downward, okay? And then once we're done tipping out our 2 sections, because I did just break it up just because there is a lot of density within her hair in this, just in this section, I am gonna just do 2 tip outs in this area, and then we're gonna move to the sections that are below the parietal. Still the same full saturation, and just feather this up into what you tease, allowing it to connect to where your foils are ending. I feel like that is just a good rule of thumb, because then you know that your tip outs are not extremely low. And then you're gonna just take your ends and you can just fold them up and place them within that foil, and then just twirl it down just to get it locked in. And then oversaturate. So now we've moved on to the section that's below the parietal, and we're just gonna place 2 foils in this section, and then I'm gonna show you how to connect this section to the section that's in the top. So we're gonna go ahead and do a little bit of a softer face frame. We're gonna start right above the ear, and we're gonna zigzag all the way up until we get to the top of the parietal. So this whole section is going to be the start of our face frame, and then we're going to connect that face frame once we get to the section that's in the top of the head. So let's go ahead and part this out of the way. After I've zigzagged, I'm going to go and just weave this section as if I'm doing a baby light. Let me just go ahead and foil this section. And then right on top of this section, we're actually going to add a slice with no space. So it'll be like a back-to-back foil using 2 different foiling techniques. So we're right on top of, so it's gonna look like we're zigzagging below, and then we have our slice on top. So full saturation, feathering up into our slice. So naturally, with what we've placed on the side, we already have a lot of movement going into the section in the top, because we've literally used 3 different techniques with the foils that we have. We are using the Simply Blonde Blue Powder Lightener with 20 volume. We're gonna leave the center of this foil a little bit puffed out so it gives her hair room to swell. And then if we take a look at this section and I pull her hair down, this is the only dimension or depth that we're getting towards the ends. So I don't want to tip this section out. So because I'm not tipping out the left side, I don't want to tip out the right side. And then we'll get back to our tip outs once we get into the top center. So let's go ahead and do the right side. And we're just gonna mimic the same placement. Okay, so now that we finished the 2 sections that are below the bridle, we're gonna dive right into her face framing. Now, I love a good widow's peak because that literally tells you the center of someone's head. So she has like a little mini, and then that is where I'm gonna start my face framing on each side of this section. Okay, so to me, this is pretty substantial because if we were to do any type of face framing, we would definitely cut into this hair, and it is pretty long. So lots of times if your client has shorter pieces along the hairline, you can pretty much do without foiling those. But if it's a certain situation where the hair is really long, make sure those pieces are foiled, because that is going to play into any type of haircut you're doing and the final results. Because if the hair is long and you miss this, there's not going to be a lot of light around the face. If the hair is short and you foil it, you're gonna have these little blonde spikes at the top that you don't really want, that aren't very attractive. So because her hair is long, let's go ahead and do kind of like a baby light. So just gonna softly pull out very small weaved pieces. Just gonna feather this towards her root. And then let's repeat one more weave. So we're gonna zigzag part. And then actually right on top of this weave, we're gonna put a slice. So we've softened her face frame, and then we're gonna build on it. That's gonna build our weight with our face framing without it being super blonde along the hairline. Now my client wears her hair down the middle, parted on the side. She kind of does it all. So this placement is really good too. She will have that flexibility, and you will be able to still see a lot of the cream sun-kissed dimension that we're going for. So we have our 3 foils that are along our hairline. We're gonna repeat these same steps on the left side and then get into creating dimension in this section that's in the top. So we had to take a quick break and remove her foils. We definitely wanted to get her to a nice level 8, but we don't want to over process at the same time. We did use blue powder to lift, so it's going to give us those 8 levels. In addition to that, she is virgin, so there's no color, there's no chemical on her hair. When you get into these type of situations, you're going to notice that the hair is going to lift really fast. So take your time, remove your foils, and then get back to your foil placement. So we do have this section in the top that we need to complete. We are going to do a bricklaying pattern, but we're also going to give a little bit of a break in between our face framing pieces. So we're going to create a nice soft diamond, and with creating this soft diamond, we're going to just do a zigzag. Instead of me teasing this section, I'm going to just go in and do a weave. This weave is a little chunkier than the other weaves that I've done, so this is gonna actually accentuate our face frame. And with this piece, I won't tease it. I will just leave it as be and just feather up into the root area. So this is gonna just connect the dots with your foils, especially because it is dimensional. So we don't wanna leave in too many dark gaps. And then once we have that zigzag, we're gonna again come down and weave. And I want to focus on making sure the foils in the top are very soft. So I don't want to pull out any chunks. Being very cautious of what I'm leaving out of the foil. And from here on out, we're going to tease. I am going to incorporate some slices because I think that it's really pretty to see a couple bands in the top of the head when you're doing dimensional foil work, because it kind of breaks up the softness. But we don't want anything to look chunky. Our goal is to create dimension that is seamless and also grows out nice and smooth. And because we've worked our way up to the top, remember her hair is very long and pretty long and even throughout the entire head. It's not too many shorter areas. It's okay that we're not so close to her root because we're gonna blend out anyway, especially when we get to our toner. So my rule of thumb is if the hair is above the shoulders, I think that is a good way to determine how close to the root you want to place your foils whenever you're doing dimensional blonde work. And I think that it would be nice if your foils are placed a little bit closer to the scalp in that sense, and then you can tone accordingly. But when the hair is really long and it's pretty even, it's okay to come off of the scalp and not place all of your foils so close to it. To me, it gives a better smooth dimensional blend. And as we're bricklaying, we're gonna mimic the same foil on the left will be the same foil that's on the right. So here, because this foil started in this corner and ended to the back of this piece here, which is a part of our face framing, we're gonna do the same thing. So it's a soft brick lay, but it's also just connecting all of the pieces when you're placing your foils. And then because she wears her hair parted down the middle as well as parted down the side, this is also going to be helpful if she does part her hair on the side. You're still going to see all of that nice dimension come through. And again, we're going to just weave low and almost take like a baby-like effect. And then tease. And remember, the pieces that you're teasing are not to be touched with lightener. That is what's gonna save you with your blending. And if you're a little nervous, just blend upward into your tease so that it doesn't slide down. So now that we've done our bricklaying here, we're gonna come in and bricklay again, just slightly. And we're gonna place a couple soft slices. Now, I like to place my slices a little bit higher up towards the back of this section. I don't like to do it right along the hairline where we've done our face framing, because I feel like a little bit of it is gonna give a gap without you even trying. So you're gonna get too much of a pocket of depth around the face, and I feel like you wanna get more of that dragging into the back, because that is where most of your depth was resting with your sections. So a nice thin slice is going to just give us a little more coverage, feathering it up into the root area so it's still nice and soft. It's important to repeat your same steps on each side, and then just pretty much bricklaying until you can't bricklay anymore towards the back. And then you can do like a cap off foil. So we're gonna just repeat these same steps. And again, I'm gonna just rotate between 2 dimensional zigzags, weaves, and teases, and then 2 soft slices. So now that we've completed bricklaying our section in the top, it's similar to what we did in the back when we tip out. So since I did diagonal verticals in the back and I tipped out vertically, here just facing her hair and looking down, it's horizontal. So that is how I'm gonna tip her hair out. What I am gonna do is just, again, do some weaves first, tease that, and then I'm only going to tip out what is left over. Now remember, we want our tip out to still appear very soft. We don't wanna see full coverage blonde on her end, so we still wanna leave that depth out. Her natural color is gonna look really nice melted through the creamy blonde. So let's leave this out so that gives us a little bit of that softness that we're looking for, and then we'll just tease this what we have in her tip out. And as long as that tip out comes up high enough where it touches her foils, that is all going to be that same connection. So to me, it will be a little bit more disconnected if we left her tip outs just on the bottom. And again, because it's not full coverage blonde towards the end, we want to make sure that it still continuously seems seamless. So we're gonna let this process go ahead and shampoo and come back with our toning process. We have completed taking out the foils, we've shampooed, and we have her parted off in 4 quadrants. So a part of the toning process is really just very much repetitive, but I'm gonna show you all how I like to root melt and then go into the mid shaft and ends. Now I have her already detangled because I want as much control as possible, because her hair is very textured, and as it dries just hanging, it's gonna want to draw in. So we want to make sure you detangle right after the shampoo. Now when we're toning, I'm really just placing the toner where I want to see it rest when it's dry, and it's really just that simple. So I'm gonna part out the bottom horizontally. So when toning, I want to keep a lot of my product at the tip of the brush, and I want to use my brush to push the hair down. So I'm gonna line my brush up parallel to my section, use the end base of this brush to push the hair down, and then just kind of sweep it through. I'm not doing a flicking motion, I'm just sweeping it downward. And then I'm gonna move very quickly. And my parts are about 1/4 inch. Honestly, the more dense the hair is, the smaller the parts should be, so that you can ensure you're getting the product all over the hair. I'm just gonna push this hair down and make sure it's fully saturated. I'm only kind of sweeping my brush down about 1.5 inches because when I blend the toner out with my comb, it's gonna move slightly. You don't wanna drag the toner down with your brush too much because then your root melt is gonna be too low. I do like to just tone all of the hair. I think you get a better seamless blend. I think it's too much trying to find the foils and trying to only cover the dimensional work that you see, because you can see some of these depth spots in here, but I just want to make sure that I'm fully saturating all of the hair, so even when I pull down, you kind of see different patterns as I work my way up horizontally. You still want to make sure you tone everything. So now that I'm about halfway through this section, I'm gonna clip the part that I haven't touched up. I'm gonna collect this hair that's already been root tapped, and I'm going to basically run my comb all the way through from the roots to the ends without stopping. I'm just gonna detangle before I get to the root area, just so that I know my comb can work all the way through the hair strands. And then when I come up, I'm gonna sweep and collect all the way down and work my way all the way through the ends. This is gonna shift that root melt shade down some and again ensure a seamless blend. But you don't want to pause while you're doing this process because you don't want there to be any line of demarcation with your toner. And once you have that combed all the way through, you're actually going to take a clip on the ends. Because the hair is curly, its texture is going to want to draw in. Use this as a weight. You're just going to clip the hair down so that it stays nice and smooth. So we're going to repeat this process throughout the whole entire head, and I'm going to show you all how I tone the mid shaft and ends. Now we have our root shade fully saturated at her roots, and that is complete throughout her whole entire head. I'll usually do this all over first, and then we go back in and do the mid shaft and ends. So with the mid shaft and ends, because I work my root shade down, I'm gonna work my mid shaft and end shade up into it. So that way I create that melt and I clear out any line of demarcation that I may end up developing. And then sometimes too, when you're working your brush down, sometimes you can move that root shade down even more than what you really want. So it's good to kind of work that toner up into your application. And because the hair wants to just naturally curl up, it is important that you fully saturate these areas, kind of getting into the grooves of the curls. Obviously, the curlier the hair, the more you're gonna have to make sure your brush kind of penetrates through each section and all of the highlighted pieces are saturated. This toner is also gonna serve as like a slight barrier. So if I was to flip this upward, it wouldn't mess up the toner that I've already applied to the hair strands. I'm just gonna place this aside and keep working my way down. And then I'm gonna get through all 4 quadrants. We're gonna rinse and come back with the final look. These are the results of my creamy sun-kissed blonde dimensional highlights. We went in with a full dimensional foil placement, worked in some different techniques on each placement in each section to create dimension throughout her hair. This is gonna go right into any season. You can switch it up with your different toners if you like, but this is so great and such a great placement for hair that is a little bit longer. So thank you guys for watching. Always stay tuned with Kenra Professional on YouTube to check out more videos.